We're going to bring in our Rome-based contributor now. Alasdair Mackenzie has joined Destination Calcio of late. We met up with him when we were in Rome for Lazio Napoli. What a game that was.
Yeah.
And Emmet and I were there. Dan, meet Alasdair. Alasdair, meet the Calcio FC guys here. We're based in London. You're in the Italian capital. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good, guys. It's the sun is shining brightly outside. I've had to actually bring down the shutters for this recording because it's so sunny today. Not to rub it in when you're back in London, but yeah, it's been very, very nice recently.
Well, Scottish blood. It's probably too sunny for you in Rome.
Hiding inside. Yeah, exactly.
How long have you been there now? Tell the viewers a little bit about yourself for those that don't know Alasdair.
Well, there were two big arrivals in 2018. It was Cristiano Ronaldo and myself both arriving in Italy at the same time.
I remember the drama around your transfer. So,
yeah, exactly. That's what everyone remembers about that summer. I was working for a newspaper in Scotland for a couple of years, and then decided I always wanted to kind of make the move out here full time. I spent a year as a student back in 2010 as well, but like a lot of you guys and your listeners, it was kind of brought up on a diet of Channel 4 Football Italia and the rest of it. So I've been a disciple ever since. And yeah, Rome was always the kind of place that called me the loudest, and decided to give it a go. And still here 7 years later. So it's been a good move, and it's a great city and chaotic place at times, but been able to kind of make a life here, and now think of it as home, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a blueprint to life, isn't it? Move to Rome and do that. You've obviously got Calcio in your DNA, like Dan and Emmet and myself here. So it's great to have you on board. You wrote for us about Claudio Ranieri and Roma. Tell us a little bit about that article and your thoughts on maybe the future of a potential maybe re-signing of Claudio.
Well, it's just this story is an interesting one as it's unfolded, because obviously Ranieri, when he first arrived, it's the emotional appointment, which was kind of necessary after they really messed up with the Juric appointment. He was kind of the only guy they had left to go to who was going to placate the fans. But also, obviously, this being his third spell, it was an opportunity to get someone in who knows the club and who they felt like could take control of this situation and the protests that were going on at the time and all these things. It's a very difficult, completely unique atmosphere, I would say, Roma. And so the importance of having someone, even if you need to bring them out of retirement, who understands that atmosphere, that passion and so on, I think you can't underplay that. Obviously, I don't think any of us expected this run of form to happen. I mean, the team now is completely unrecognizable from the one we saw in the first 4 months of this season, when a lot of my Roma supporting friends, to be honest, almost gave up on this team. And he's, not exactly had a huge boost in January in the transfer market or anything. He's just got the best out of the players he's already had. He's simplified their game plan and got them to believe in playing a certain way. And yeah, the piece was kind of based around this idea that he is the man searching for the successor himself. He's stepping into the directorial role at the end of the year, and he is very much being leaned on by the Friedkins, perhaps because they know they can't get this wrong and they want to feel like they're sharing the responsibility of this move slightly with someone who's respected like Ranieri. But it's getting to the point now where it's hard to see who is out there that is going to be able to do a better job than Ranieri currently is. And you'll certainly get sexier appointments. You'll certainly get coaches who have more attractive brands of football. You'll certainly get more exciting coaches and names out there. But in terms of people who will get a better tune out of this squad, a squad they're not going to be able to massively bolster in the summer because of the FFP restrictions around the club, I'm not sure they're going to find anyone better than Ranieri. I'm talking about the club's aim of getting back into the Champions League. That's somewhere they've not been since 2018. It looks pretty unlikely they're going to get there this year, although they've somehow put themselves back in the conversation. And when it comes to that goal, achieving that goal, I think giving Ranieri 1 extra year as a full season is probably likelier to get them there than taking a gamble, which most of the other names being linked to the job would be.
Yeah, well, we've seen what's happened with Milan, for example. They've tried to sort of, reinvent the wheel there. It hasn't worked out exactly the way they wanted it. And Roma actually tried that as well. We've seen some coaches come and go. Ranieri, as Alasdair's been saying, is the guy that's come in and steadied the ship. Names, perhaps, for Roma, in case Ranieri didn't extend beyond this season. Emmet or Dan, anyone in particular you're thinking of?
Yeah, well, I think Giampiero Gasparini has been linked with Roma in light of the Ada Lookman drama and comments that Gasparini made coming out of it, saying that he may not stay post this summer. But I think, as we were talking off air, I think Gasparini suits a club like Atalanta more than a Roma, a Lazio, a Juve, Milan, Inter, because he has that time to build, do things his way. The pressure in Rome, especially on the Roma side, is monumental. So I don't think Gasparini is the right fit. Maybe someone like Roberto De Zerbi, maybe, who plays a nice brand of football, but again, can he handle an environment like Roma? He's at Marseille, which kind of has a similar fanatical fan base. So maybe De Zerbi could be a shout.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you want someone who's removed from the environment, who can come in, doesn't sort of feel intimidated by the pressure of delivering for Roma. But as Alasdair has been saying, having someone from the inside like Ranieri, like a Roman and a Romanista who knows exactly what the club is about, makes a difference. I think Italiano's done superbly at Bologna. Whether they will want to move from there, because it's a sideways move at the minute, the way the table is looking, and obviously Bologna are a settled club, going places. He might have to look abroad, but Roma have looked abroad of late, and it's not really worked out for them, has it? Like, you look at Rudy Garcia and so on.
Yeah, maybe they might. Name. Surely not. I mean, I'd love to see De Rossi as the Daniel LaRusso under Mr. Miyagi Ranieri for a season. I'd like to see what Alasdair's thinking there. Maybe Ranieri, De Rossi as his number 2, bring him back in. I guess he's technically still under contract as well. They wouldn't have to spend any extra money to bring De Rossi back in. He's a Roma boy through and through. So is Ranieri. Let's move on. We know that you are a Roma expert, but you have Lazio in your blood. Tell us a little bit about your Lazio background.
Well, just I guess it harks back to the said glory years of Football Italia in the 90s, and the fact that when I first started watching Serie A was when Eriksson was building that absolutely incredible team. I mean, I enjoyed your guys' pod the other week about Juan Sebastian Veron. I mean, it was just an unbelievable cast of players that were assembled in that time. So I guess you could say it was a kind of form of weird glory hunting in the late 90s, but I did stick with them beyond that when everything completely fell to pieces, pretty much immediately after I started following them. Yeah, that's it really. It's just been a pretty turbulent club to follow, I guess, in that kind of 25-year span from the heights of that team and the won the Scudetto in 2000 up until now. There's been all sorts of highs and lows, let's say.
Yeah, well, Lazio back then, Veron. If you haven't seen that, go and watch it on our YouTube channel. Emmet, got a question?
Alasdair, obviously Marco Baroni has surprised a lot of people this season. You know, he come from Hellas Verona last season. He did a good job, but I don't think many of us expected him to do as well as he's done. What's your take on Baroni this season, and do you think he'll get a second season at Lazio? And what's the general feeling around him from your friends in the capital?
Taking out the 5-0 against Bologna. Let's pretend that never happened.
Yeah, that aside.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny. Obviously, I wrote a pretty glowing and complimentary piece about him, and then 2 days later, they go and lose 5-0.
They did qualify for the Europa League quarters, though. So that's it's a big thing. As you wrote in that article, it's only the third time since 2003 that they've qualified they've gone this deep in a European tournament. So go on, take it away.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I mean, that was more what the point of that piece was very much framed around the European, what he's done in Europe, because it has been, you can't describe how much apathy had developed around the fan base towards the Europa League, and how little, it wasn't even just this thing about feeling like you're above it, which I think a lot of Italian clubs have been guilty of over years. It was more just that they'd been in it so much. This is 11th season since it was rebranded in 2009. The Lazio have been in the tournament, and they just never do anything in it. And it's one embarrassment or another, or the odd run. I mean, they managed to get to the quarterfinals a couple of times before, but that's been it. And on both quick cases, kind of fell out after bad second legs against Fenerbahce and Salzburg. The case against Salzburg, a complete collapse. And basically, they've just never been able to fight on two fronts. So one of the things Baroni's done brilliantly is, and I think it's helped that the makeup of the squad has changed so much that it's not reliant on superstar players like your Immobile, your Milinkovic-Savic, Alberto, Felipe Anderson. These guys who've formed the complete backbone of Lazio's success in the last 5 or 6 years, they're all gone now, and the quality is lower in the squad. But because the quality is lower, there's a much smaller difference between who's on the bench and who's starting, which has allowed Baroni to be much better at spreading minutes across the team, keeping more players match fit, match sharp, because they're all getting more opportunities. And so that's resulted in him having far more success than any of us expected. The start of the year, Lotito, the first game of the season, I still remember I was there. It was awful atmosphere because everyone was protesting against Claudio Lotito. He was perceived to have been far not nearly ambitious enough, basically losing a coach like Maurizio Sarri with the CV he's got and replacing him with a guy who's just had half a good season in a relegation battle. That's how it was seen. Not saying I'm necessarily totally agreeing with that view.
And a guy that scored the Scudetto winning goal for Napoli against Lazio. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then a transfer window where they brought in a fair few players, but a lot were gambles and a few were kind of, from lower table clubs and not particularly setting the heather on fire, let's say. So I think that he's impressed in terms of what he's done domestically and in Europe, the way he's managed to balance both competitions. The style of football, particularly at the start of the season, was really, really entertaining to watch. But he's now in a period where more questions are being asked of him than ever before. The 5-0 against Bologna was pretty unacceptable on many fronts. The team is clearly tired mentally and physically. They've just had 4 away games in their last 5. And all these fixtures piling up, injuries piling up too to a lot of players in the squad. But there's still no real excuse for a performance like that in a game that's that important. And it's also not the first time. I mean, I was there also when Lazio got thrashed 6-0 by Inter not too long ago. But in big games this season, they just haven't shown up. And they managed to get that win at San Siro against Milan. But obviously, very strange circumstances around Milan at that time. Otherwise, they lost the derby convincingly. They've been beaten by Juventus, beaten by Fiorentina, and now beaten by Bologna heavily, beaten by Inter. They're not able to perform in these big Serie A games. And it's ultimately going to cost them, not only because of the points that they're throwing away to rivals in this top 4 race, but also that if it ends up in a head-to-head tiebreaker, there's nobody who they're going to finish ahead of. And that is not an unlikely situation. So, he's certainly under pressure over this international break to come up with an answer to why this team is on a downward trend, how to get them out of this slump, how to get the defense to actually keep a clean sheet ever, because they're conceding. They're 12th in the Serie A table for goals conceded. He's basically, in summary, had a far better start than anyone expected, but there's a lot of questions around whether he can continue that or whether this season's about to fall apart completely in the final couple of months.
Yeah, the growing pains are obviously there. It's all about how they're going to handle the rest of the season. But if they do win the Europa League, they could make the Champions League that way. Dan, did you have a question?
Well, I did, yeah, because Alasdair mentioned that Europe has been sort of the safe haven for Baroni this season. And do you think that they can come back against Bodo Glimt and get a result? Because obviously the bracket is opening up quite nicely for them, because if they get past Bodo, then they'll have either Spurs or Frankfurt to contend with. I mean, Spurs are they're not been great this season. Can we say that?
Well, they're
They're
bottom
Spurs.
half. They're bottom half of the Premier League.
They're Spurs, yeah.
It's Spurs as well, as most people will say.
As Chiellini says, it's the Spurs.
I think my take on this, and the Lazio, I know don't like it when I say this because it feels like it's getting too far ahead of yourself, but realistically, Lazio are never going to have a better chance of getting to the European final than the one that they've got in front of them here. I mean, from the first draw. I mean, it's the reward for doing so well in the league phase where they finished top. Let's not forget about that massive group of 36 teams. And they didn't lose until the final day when they were already qualified. They only just got past Pilsen. That was a really nervous night. But yeah, you're right. Bodo Glimt is going to be tough, especially the away leg, because they can basically have the tie won with their home games. And Lazio need to be really careful to just come away with something from that trip to the Arctic Circle. Plastic pitch, difficult surroundings, difficult journey. Olympiacos beat them in Athens, but it wasn't enough because they'd basically already lost the tie in the away leg. And that happens to a lot of teams against Bodo. So, I mean, look, Roma lost 6-1 up there a few years ago under Mourinho and that kind of infamous game. So there's no guarantee whatsoever. But I look at this run-in and I have to say, I think of it as being easier for Lazio. None of it is easy, but it's more realistic that Lazio get into the Champions League by winning this Europa League than by finishing in the top four in Serie A, because they still have a bunch of big games coming up in Serie A. And that's a lot of difficult games they're going to have to win. To win the Europa League, they're going to have to win difficult games too, but they're going to be against Bodo, then Spurs or Frankfurt, and then probably Athletic Club or Man United. It's none of it is easy, but I think that once you're at this stage of the competition in the Europa League, with this Lazio team and its limitations, I feel like the Europa League should be the priority.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Alasdair there. Just to put you on the spot, top three Lazio players, if they're going to do it, who are the most important players for them?
Well, Nicolo Ravella, his absence is really badly for not playing, which has been the case recently in the middle of this tough run. I really think he's one of the most underrated midfielders in Serie A. He's had a really, really good season, but he's not a highlights player. You need to watch him for 90 minutes to understand what he's offering, because he's very good defensively, very good on the ball. He doesn't score goals, which perhaps is why people don't rate him. But he's started to try. He's been hitting the odd 30-yarder every now and then to give it a go. But yeah, Ravella for sure. Tati Castellanos, his absence has been felt badly while he's been injured. His transformation this season has been kind of amazing, from being almost a laughingstock last year when he was just so poor in front of goal, as Immobile's number 2, and he's transformed into Lazio's most important player in attack. And then I guess you would say Mattia Zaccagni, who's been really impressive, actually, the way he's stepped up to the captaincy. He's gone from being one of the good players in a great attack to being the main man with the number 10 shirt, the captain's armband, the responsibility to perform. And I think he's really stepped up too. But yeah, I mean, it's hard not to mention guys like Guendouzi, who's there every game, giving everything he's got, or Romagnoli or Tavares. I mean, there have been some really good performances, individual performances in this squad this season that have surprised, but probably those three are the core of the Lazio threat.
Yeah, the engine room there, Rovella. That's why Spalletti's called him up. You've mentioned Rovella, Castellanos, Zaccagni. Also, Guendouzi and Romagnoli get an honourable mention there from Alasdair. Can they light up the Olimpico? I'll tell you what, we've got some footage from Alasdair that he sent over a couple of weeks ago, that Roma footage where he's scanned around, he's panned around the entire stadium. That went viral for us on the web. Alasdair was there for that game. That's when he wrote on King Claudio and Roma. Since then, they've fizzled out of Europe. Lazio's still there. We had some social comments on those videos about Roma. Chicho T watched the video from the first leg of Roma Bilbao on Instagram and wrote, "This is why Italian football is the best." You don't see this in the EPL, as he has gone for the acronym there, to Dan's disgust, the English Premier League. I think the Premier League has a different feel to it, doesn't it?
Well, you don't see stuff like that because you can't bring a bottle top into a ground in
Sure.
England.
Yeah. There's nothing. And I guess,
It's a lot more sanitized. I mean, Italy feels a lot more genuine. I'm sure Alistair will agree. There's a more sort of a feel of an old school feel, if
Yeah.
you like.
The Premier League has its strengths, though. Like when you go there, you expect a certain atmosphere. It's always buzzing. It's always full, and that's the beauty of that. But yeah, Serie A definitely. Italian football has that different flavour to it that stems back from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and it's sort of it's a slow cooker. It's never going to go away, is it?
Yeah, I think Italian football is more. I would say the energy is more raw, whereas in England it's kind of it ebbs and flows. There's periods where it's very quiet, and then if something happens, the crowd kind of rise up. Whereas in Italy, I feel obviously all of four of us here, we've all been to games in Serie A, Serie B. You almost get a constant din. The noise never really stops, but it's just constant for 90 minutes. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah. I mean, we can have a long conversation about it for maybe another time.
Yeah.
I think the demographic in the ground play a massive part in the
absolutely.
It does. It helps teams as well. It can be the 12th man, as often coaches refer to. Daniel Zerato on Facebook.
Is it the former Parma player?
It's not. It could be a relation. I think he's based in Australia, Daniel. So Daniel Zerato, if you're listening in, Dan wants to know your family ties. He says, imagine being there after watching that same Roma video. Wouldn't get that atmosphere in many other countries. Roma deserve a top team. And I think that's where Alasdair's going with. He's trying to come up with solutions for them when he writes his articles about who could be the best player, coach to take them forward. Also, we're getting lots of love on the Elder Shamurodov video as well, which Alasdair also took for us. His goal-scoring celebrations at the Olimpico. Understandably, the Uzbeks sharing that one around on the internet there. Alasdair Mackenzie, he is at AS Mackenzie on Twitter. We're going to have him doing a bunch of other stuff for us, including following up with Lazio in the Europa League. We'll see if they can get all the way to the big one, the Champions League. We'll see how they go in Serie A. What's it like for you, just off the cuff here? What's it like for you going to the Olimpico week after week? You also cover rugby. You were there for the Six Nations.
Feels like I should have a tent set up in that place because it can be kind of, especially if you're, both teams in Europe, both teams Serie A relentless, and then you throw some other sports into the mix, and it can be, every 2 or 3 games you find yourself there. But as you guys found out as well, when we went to the Napoli game together, good exercise because you have to walk up about 500 steps to get into the Tribuna Stampa there. No, I mean, sometimes I do need to remind myself of the privilege and, how special it is to be able to do that. Having grown up watching this stadium and my whole childhood and thinking about it, it took me about 15 years before I even got there after following Serie A, and now I think I've done about 250 games in the seven years I've been here. So it's a funny place. The on the back of what you're saying about the atmosphere and so on, you do often get this different takes from people who are living here and going to games, and then people who visit, because a lot of the people here will complain about the facilities and how expensive tickets are, or what how bad the view is and this kind of stuff, whereas people come here and they really love how raw the passion is and the ultra culture and the banners and all this stuff, and it is just, I think, basically completely different. We don't know, Roma and Lazio are both trying to build their own stadiums. This is a story for another time, but it would be very interesting to see what that would do to football culture in Rome if Roma and Lazio actually ever got around to wading through the miles and miles of red tape. They're going to need a big machete to get through all of that, but hopefully eventually they'll get there.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that story. I'm sure Alasdair will cover that, and maybe even send him down to find out what's happening at the Calciotto with Francesco Totti in Rome, and a few other stories there. It's the Italian capital. It's where so much culture, and a lot of people would envy Alasdair in his position. He's kind of like from a Roma perspective, maybe the Daniel De Rossi of journalists. He's cracked up 200-300 matches now, and maybe Stefano Mauri from a Lazio perspective. I'm not sure who is the all-time games record there, but yeah. Again, thanks to Alasdair Mackenzie for joining us here on the Cultural FC podcast.